There's a new Superman movie coming out, so I thought it'd be a perfect time to do a video about Superman. This is the history of one of the most iconic superheroes of all time, and his rise and fall and rise again. Superman was created by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, two teenagers from Cleveland, Ohio. Their first version of the character was incredibly bizarre and more like Lex Luthor than the one we would know today. Created in a 1933 self-published magazine, or fanzine as it's called, science fiction, the advanced guard of future civilization. It featured a Superman who was a bald telepathic villain inspired by Nietzsche's Ubermensch. He's a German guy. Watch the Irby battle, Philosopher battle to know more about that guy. And he was a very weird character, let's be honest. But they would change him drastically when they got a comic book deal at DC Comics, then known as National Allied Publications. They actually struggled selling off the character at the time, and National Allied Publications was the only one that was biting. They actually sold the entire character rights for $130, which is about like $2,000 in today's money, for the right to the character entirely, which would end up screwing them over later. When Superman debuted in Action Comics #1 of June 1938, he became an instant success with DC Comics, becoming their main flagship character, including many rip-offs, including Captain Marvel, which I bet you know is a rip-off of Superman, kind of is. He's now known as Shazam, in case you're wondering. Superman was actually designed as a character who would stand up for people who have less rights. Even back in the day, you could see him actually helping out people who were in bad needs, because this was during the Great Depression, where there's a lot of people out of the luck. There's a lot of persecution, racism, anti-Semitism against certain people, including Shuster and Siegel, who were Jewish. There's a lot of anti-Semitic stuff around the time. If you know about World War II, you know the history. Superman was a character who stood up for the little guy, and he's always been that type of character. He's for hope. Even though he seems like a broken character, he always stands for what's the best in humanity, always looking out for the little guy, which is why Superman has a big fan base when it comes to that aspect. It's hard to reach general audience with that sometimes, but maybe, just maybe, some of them are catching on. A lot of things I most know about the character are here in the first appearance, including his alter ego of Clark Kent, a mild-mannered reporter who has a crush on his co-worker, Lois Lane, and his secret identity is Superman. All the elements that will become superhero staples are right here in the first issue. But as I said, he became an instant hit and would even get his first solo story, the first superhero character to have their own solo comic story, only 1 year into his run. That's pretty impressive. And in 1941, he would co-appear with DC's other most popular character, Batman and Psychic Robin, in the comic series known as World's Finest, or originally World's Best Comics, but would become known as World's Finest Comics. In his early years, Shuster and Siegel developed most of the things we know about Superman's backstory and lore. His planet Krypton, his name being Kal-El, him being adopted by city Kansas farmers in a city known as Smallville, and him joining the Daily Planet, and all his little co-friends and all the other stuff like Lois Lane, Jimmy Olsen, Perry White, and his arch-nemesis Lex Luthor. In the 1940s, Superman became a symbol of American values during World War II, appearing on war bonds, posters, propaganda, and a whole lot of comic covers depicting him beating up Nazi and other Axis powers, including the infamous cover of Action Comics number 58, where Superman has a giant printing press where he's printing out, Superman says you can slap a Jap. Yeah, that didn't age well, but, you know, Imperial Japan was pretty bad, but, you know, slurs like that, it's bad, you know, Superman, what the hell are you supposed to do in there? Come on, man. One of Superman's most noble powers is the ability to fly. However, in his first appearance, he didn't do that. He just jumped really high. The change to make him fly was actually done by the Fleischer Studio, who thought that making him fly was better to animate than making him jump high, though they did a couple times in earlier shorts. Speaking of which, Superman was the first character to be adapted into other forms of media other than comic books. This includes animation, films, and all sorts of stuff. Most notably was a radio show, which was the first adapted media of superhero. This radio show was very popular and ran to the 1950s from 1940. It was also notably for adding the idea of kryptonite, so an actor could take a break from voicing the character. And yeah, that became a staple, just because of that, in that feat. With the popularity of the radio show, quickly came an animated series by Fleischer Animation, which was the highest produced cartoons at the time. These 17 shorts by Fleischer are considered to be classics due to their great animation and would even inspire the look of Batman the Animated Series, which would inspire Superman the Animated Series. It's full circle, isn't it? And like other superheroes, Superman got a film serial in 1948, though not the first, as Batman and Captain Marvel beat him to the punch by a couple years there. And thus, Kirk Alyn will be the first actor to portray Superman in live action, though some of his flying scenes were depicted in animations, you can see there. Another notable media was The Adventures of Superman, the 1950s TV show which starred George Reeves as the Man of Steel, which was a popular actor amongst kids and boomers of today. The actor would unfortunately pass away right after the show aired due to unfortunate circumstance. Don't look it up if you get too sad. But a lot of people say he was the groundwork for a lot of further adaptations of Superman, including Christopher Reeve, who ironically shares the same last name. Coincidence? Maybe. Meanwhile, in the comics, they kept expanding and adding new characters like villain Brainiac, Bizarro, a bizarre version of Superman from Altered Dimension, and somehow even stranger, Mr. Mxyzptlk. This guy is very bizarre. Maybe he'll be adapted in the movies, who knows? He's crazy as hell, that's all I can say about him. During this time, Superman comics became a lot more weird and bizarre. Because a lot of characters had sidekicks, they wanted to do one of Superman, but instead they decided to do a different route and make a Superboy origin comic, which took place in Smallville with a new love interest Superman known as Lana Lang instead of Lois Lane. And also his sidecast get their own comics, like Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen and Superman's girlfriend Lois Lane, which would feature incredibly bizarre covers of Superman doing usually jackass things to them for apparently no reason. I mean, do I even need to explain what's going on in this cover just to tell you why it's bizarre as hell? Even Bizarro is less bizarre than this. Also during this time, Superman became really strong. Originally he was just a guy who could jump high, he was super strong and invulnerable, but now he has the power later on during the 50s to just sneeze a universe out of existence, or a solar system, which is insane. And mostly you've become known for being the most strongest character in pretty much comics history because of some of these insane feats he does in these early comics, especially the 1950s ones. Superman wasn't really part of any team other than collaborating with Batman and Robin from here and there, but both of them would join this team known as the Justice League of America in the 1960s, which would become the Silver Age of comics, which would slow down some of the craziness of the 1950s. Though, oddly enough, both Batman and Superman do not appear in any of the early covers of Justice League comics, which were technically the Brave and the Bold, because I guess they want to show off their more lesser-known heroes, even though these guys are very popular. But yeah, it is strange that this cover doesn't feature Batman or Superman, despite the fact that they are part of the League in this issue. While Superman comics remain a little bit stagnant, he would get a fresh reboot with Hollywood in 1978, with the first superhero to get a full blockbuster film known as Superman, played by the legendarily awesome Christopher Reeves. The film would boost Superman's popularity and the idea of superheroes being blockbuster films into the public consciousness right again. Though despite this, the film did have quite a lot of behind-the-scenes problems, including splitting up the film, directors firing, and all sorts of stuff that would influence the sequels, which would not be as well received. Superman 2 was not as well received by the original audiences and even has two different versions, those most notably for bringing General Zod, a relatively newer villain to the Superman mythos that most fans know and love. Though this film is mostly known for its two different cuts, the Donner original version or the theatrical version. It's up to you or you decide which one you like better. Though unfortunately this franchise did fall off, with Superman 3 becoming a lot more goofy and cheesy and being more of a comedy film with pretty bad comedy. It was so bad that Christopher Reeve did not want to do another one, but when the studio offered him a giant sum of money, he couldn't refuse the offer. Which leads us to Superman 4: The Quest for Peace, a laughably bad film starring the original Nuclear Man, and really bad budget effects, mostly due to the fact that most of the budget went entirely into Christopher Reeve's paycheck in order to get him back. But yeah, this film is infamous for its bad quality and would pretty much kill off Superman franchise until, well, 2006. And when I say franchise, I mean film franchise. Though they would try a spin-off starring Supergirl, Superman's cousin, but the film also failed, even not really being connected to the Christopher Reeve movies anyway, so it didn't really matter. However, in the comics, Superman was doing better in the 80s, due to the very popular Crisis on Infinite Earths series, which streamlined the continuity and made Superman's powers more readable, since they were a little extreme to the point. Just kept keeping his basic things, as well as killing off his poor cousin. Wah wah, she come back, don't worry. Though his most famous comic from around this time was 1992's The Death of Superman, where they introduced a new villain called Doomsday, one that was so strong that it beat Superman after Superman defeated him. It was a comic that would become one of the top-selling comics of all time. It was cement Superman as a great character, as he fought to save everything that he viewed as sacred, and would actually boost Superman's sales for quite a while afterwards. You would think DC would struggle killing off one of their most popular characters, however, they didn't. They created a well-thought-out storyline where Superman does come back eventually, but a much weaker state where he has to build up to his previous form, giving a new look as well as other characters taking up the mantle. It was very well done, and a lot of Superman fans like this era of Superman comics quite a bit. While not in movies, Superman appeared in TV shows like Lois and Clark: The New Adventures, a live-action series starring Dean Cain, which became a cult classic among fans. Superman would get his own popular animated series known as Superman the Animated Series, which was actually a spin-off of the very popular Batman the Animated Series, heading Superman to what is known as fans as the Timverse, since these shows were created by A guy named Tim, apparently. Bruce Timm, to be exact. Another popular TV show for the character was Smallville, a 2000s show starring Superman in his early years that was very low budget but had a nice charm and great acting into it that some actors, including the new one, were inspired to by this day. One scrap project from this era that we will never see is Tim Burton's take on Superman, or taking over Batman. He was going to do a Superman film starring Nicolas Cage. It sounded weird, and maybe we're best off if it didn't exist, but at the same time, it would have been cool to see. Warner wanted the character to make a comeback on the big screen with Superman Returns, starring Brett and Ralph. However, the film did not do too well due to the fact it was boring as hell. The film honestly impacted Superman in a negative way, making the character seem like he was just a boring Boy Scout for the fact there was very little going on in the film, and it was actually a really bad sequel adaptation of the Christopher Reeve films. Yeah, this film's supposed to be the fifth one. I don't see it. During this late 2000s, early 2010s era, Superman had a bit of an identity crisis, as a character was just not as popular as he once was compared to other superhero characters that were coming into the mainstream, as all of his famous TV shows had ended, and by this point they were trying to reinvent the character to be more grounded, but also more edgy. The New 52 version of the character was the DC Universe reboot, got rid of his trunks and made him, well, not as interesting, though I'm not too sure. This will all culminate in this 2013 film Man of Steel by director Zack Snyder, and starring Henry Cavill as the new version of Superman, who was a lot less hopeful and a lot more dark, but honestly, a lot more boring. While there were some good concepts and great shots in the film, a lot of Superman fans felt like it betrayed his character, while a new sect of fans liked this edgier appearance and look, and would even like the future Snyder films that ultimately failed. In order to compete with Marvel's MCU, this version of Superman went up against Batman and joined the Justice League. However, this version by Zack Snyder wasn't that great, and Warner Bros. Interfering just made things a lot worse. Him fighting Batman felt a little forced, and the writing was pretty terrible, including terrible adaptations of his villains like Doomsday and Lex Luthor. It seemed like this version of Superman really had nowhere to go, especially when they killed him off in his second film. Things were even worse with the Justice League, which became a famous aspect of yet another director versus studio thing. We saw that in Superman 2, now we see it again. Instead of viewing the character as the hopeful character we know from the comics, or even a intimidating one like Zack Snyder wants to be, we thought of a guy with a really weird lip. What the hell? Yeah, that totally looks real there. Even his still frame looks like shit. Due to DC's poor mistreatment of their actors and cast, Superman would never really return, and given weird-ass cameos like this one. What the hell was his head? Superman's most prominent appearance since these films was, believe it or not, an animated film starring his own dog, which is pretty sad. DC really didn't know how to treat this character. Even though there's been an influx of superhero media, one character that people actually want to see is Superman, specifically one that represents him in his purest state, which is one that fights for truth, justice, and the American way. Well, maybe not the American way currently, but you know what I mean. And it seems that the new Superman movie by James Gunn will give us exactly what fans have been wanting for a while now. Not a dark, brooding version of the character, but one that represents his character as pure value, especially in this darker world that we're in. We really need a character like Superman. So let's see if this film is good. I have high hopes since I'm a big James Gunn fan, honestly, I love his work. And honestly, this film looks pretty good. It is pretty clear this character is here to stay, even if his popularity wanes from time to time. There's always going to be room for a character that represents the best of mankind, even if he might be considered boring. The best way to do Superman is just really be true to what the character represents. He's a guy who has all the powers, and he tries to do the best he can to help everyone out, even those who don't usually get help. And that's why a lot of people like Superman, including me. I was never that big a Superman character, but as people have showcased, this guy has a lot to offer, and I really like that. There's plenty of great Superman storylines in the comics, as he's been in tons of them, so I recommend go checking some of those out if you can find them out. I'm not an expert on that, so I recommend checking anyone else's articles out on that. Those interested in watching Superman, I highly recommend checking out his TV shows. Those seem to be the most critically acclaimed, and they have a lot going on for them. And they seem to feature a character pretty consistently across them. Like the Fleischer Superman, the My Adventures of Superman, the animated series, and so on and so forth. Seem like pretty good reputations of the character that seem to be well popular and really well received and well adapted of the character. When it comes to films, I'd probably check out the Christopher Reeve one, or some of the animated film adaptations they do of comics at DC. DC is pretty good at actually adapting some of their comics into actual animated movies for direct-to-streaming or video, and these aren't bad at all. So you want more of that, and that's what I recommend. I can't recommend many of the Superman movies other than the first two Christopher Reeve ones, and that's it, until the next one comes out. The one thing that Superman really struggles with, in comparison to other heroes, is video games. There have been quite a few Superman video games, however, most of them have a really bad reputation. In fact, a couple of them are considered to be some of the worst video games of all time, like Superman 64 and Nintendo 64. It's strange there hasn't been a good Man of Steel game, a game based off Superman, not Man of Steel the movie, which I don't think there was, actually. But yeah, Superman games struggle, and that's one of the things that I feel like maybe in the future we could probably get something better. Hey, Batman and Spider-Man can have such great games, why can't Superman? And that is it for this video. Thanks for watching. If you want me to do more of these, go let me know in the comment section below. Leave a like if you liked it. Leave a dislike if you hate me. That's all fine and good. Thank you for watching. I'll be watching the new Superman movie. I'll let you know how it goes. I'm not sure when, but I will be watching it, hopefully soon. It looks pretty good, I won't lie. And yeah, thank you for watching this deep dive into a character that I wasn't as familiar with before, so this is very insightful for me as well as to you. Thank you for watching.